Perfect. Good.
All right, we are recording, so here we go.
All right.
So Kirstie, what drew you into military service, and why did you want to serve?
Honestly, it was because I was raised by two Marine parents. So I had a mom and a dad who got up every single day. And in my eyes, especially at 3 and 4 years old, I watched them put on the cape, their superhero uniform. And so I knew from, gosh, I don't know, the moment that I watched my mom walk across the parade deck on Parris Island, South Carolina for her Marine Corps boot camp, I just knew that's what I wanted to do. So yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer is I wanted to give my parents a reason to be proud of me like I was proud of them.
Wonderful. It's a tough question, though. This is a tough one. It's probably the hardest of the bunch. What are the headlines of your story?
Oof, yeah, that is hard. The headlines of my story.
Yeah.
I would say pre-injury, I would say that I'm one of the few women who have combat action wings with 3 gold stars, and one of the few who have also been combat meritoriously promoted. Post-injury, I would say that my biggest accomplishments, hands down, even though it took me some time to get there, was I was the 2019 ESPN Pat Tillman Award recipient. I was the 2020 Higher Ground Award recipient from the Martin Luther King family. And actually in March of 2020, I was the youngest inductee ever into the International Sports Hall of Fame. And ironically, I think it's because I managed to pull some kind of good out of several bad things happening. So.
God bless you. That's what I say. You are blessed with an indomitable spirit. What are the main challenges for a woman in the military?
Don't get me wrong. I think any guy or gal coming into the military, especially at a young age, being 17, 18, 19 years old, going into this new situation where it's a whole new culture, a whole new way of life, you have to prove yourself. But I think especially for the women that are going into more, male-dominated fields, it's hard. You have to learn how to keep your head down, have thick skin, keep a chip on your shoulder, and prove yourself day in and day out. I think, again, for the young guys, I think they have to do something similar. But for the women, you really have to wake up every single day and say, hey, I'm going to show you that I can protect you just like you're protecting the men and women to your left and your right. But I also think you have to prove yourself and say, hey, I can do the same job that the men are doing. And if anything, I can do it better.
So following on from that, what's it like to be in the career field with mostly men? You sort of answered that already, but let's take it a little bit further.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, being in a male-dominated, military occupational hang on, let me rewind. For me, being in a male-dominated military occupational specialty, a lot of it was really being able to look myself in the mirror every single day and say, hey, I'm proud of who you are and who you're trying to be. I think for me, it really challenged me to say, this is the role that I'm in right now, as an E1, E2, E3, but this is where I want to be, and this is the impact that I want to make. So by being able to walk into the shop every single day, even as a 19-year-old girl, surrounded by men, it was being able to strip away the excess and stay focused on who I wanted to be and the impact that I wanted to leave, whether it was on my shop or the Marine Corps or even on the world with the deployments.
You think there's a veteran advantage once you leave the military?
I think today, when you leave the military, there's definitely an advantage, if you will, to being a veteran. And I only say that because, don't get me wrong, maybe once a day somebody says thank you for my service, and that feels good. And of course, there's your veteran preference points and whatnot. But I think big picture, there's really not, because I think a lot of the things that we go through are undermined or underplayed, and people don't even understand what it's like to be in the military. Don't get me wrong, joining the military at a young age and having that totally reshape your thought process, your way of life, how you carry yourself, the whole nine, and then getting back out. I mean, there's just a whole evolution that you go through and then you go back through when you transition into being a civilian. And I think a lot of that is ignored. I also think there's a lot of things, whether people deployed or whether they, stayed stateside their entire service, like there are things that happen that people can't see. So whether it's an invisible injury because of a traumatic brain injury or some kind of, emotional side of things, like there are lots of things that people take for granted as far as serving. But don't get me wrong, like there's even, looking at me, you can tell something's different about me. But for me, everything that I went through was worth it. So for the public sector, like anything, I mean, there's pros and cons to your service. But on the flip side, at the end of the day, I get to look back and say I'm damn proud of my service. And that's more important than anything that anybody else could ever give me.
Amen. Well said. What do you think that you learned in the military that will best serve you in your professional and personal life now?
Ironically, it's probably be the last thing that anybody ever thought a Marine would say, is how to lead with kindness. I didn't have leaders that led with kindness. And over time, I realized that the relationships that I had in the Marine Corps, obviously professionally, they were, people were coming to me, not necessarily as a friend, as a peer and everything else, but they were coming to me because I was able to have compassion for them. And I was able to truly come to them and say, hey, I'm willing to lay my life down for you. And anything that comes before that or in between, I've got you. And I think in today's day and age, especially with what we're going through right now, leaders have lost that compassion and that care for what their subordinates are going through. So for me, I had a lot of poor leaders, but I also had a couple of good apples too, and they really gave me the leader that I wanted to emulate. So I think being able to realize that, hey, even on the bad days when I don't want to show up for myself, I can show up for the people around me.
You made me think that I'm sure, the military, being in the military and not having served myself, I can only imagine that it's a very intense crucible and a place that has a very amped up intensity that makes everything seem bigger. And it is, because there's so much at stake. And then it made me think of all the teachers I've had in my life and how I can count on maybe one hand how many that I remember who really inspired me and opened up my mind and spoke to me in my soul, who I remember very fondly. And I guess that maybe in that way it's sort of analogous. I mean, there wasn't any, ninth grade advanced biology is not the same as you're in a firefight and a helicopter. But when we look back and you think of all the people who influenced me, there were a lot of bad apples, man. And I've done my best to delete them. Anyway, I digress.
You're good.
What's the best thing about being a military service member? I think you've touched on this before, but what is the best thing for you?
Oh, honestly, again, now that I'm out, it's just this huge sense of accomplishment and pride. Again, I mean, you can see my medals behind my head right now. But I think while I was in, it was really just a testament as to again, who I wanted to be and the drive that I wanted to have in life. Because don't get me wrong, like the first couple of years of being in the Marine Corps, nobody, my shop, none of those guys wanted to see me succeed.
I'm sorry.
I saw it as a challenge every single day.
Kirstie, say that again, please. I dropped out. I missed that.
No. So now, after I've been out, there's obviously this huge sense of pride. But while I was in the shop or in the Marine Corps, the first couple of years, or at least the first year, they didn't really want me around. They didn't want to see me succeed. But over time, as you build trust and gain their confidence in you, basically, you also just realize everything that you can overcome, everything that you are capable of. Because even when people around you have doubt, you also have this this overwhelming sense of accomplishment. Because every day, whatever, 5 p.m., you take off the uniform, you go home, call it a day. You look back and you say, you know what, I did it. I made it through another day. And so for me, it was just this, way of being able to build, again, my confidence in myself, but also this awareness of who I am and the person that I can be, and how it can actually help other people. Because when you look back and at 17 years old, when you joined the Marine Corps, 18, 19, yeah, these people don't necessarily have confidence in you, but then you look at how much you've accomplished by the end of your service, whether that's 4 years, 8 years, whatever. You just learn so much. And I feel like especially the corporate area of America is really lacking in that. We've forgotten what it is to be a good leader and to sacrifice for one another and to sacrifice parts of ourselves that we never wanted to, but then realize that we're going to come back better and stronger for it in the end. So yeah, that was long-winded.
Perfect follow-on question, which is the last one. What do you want your legacy to be to other young women?
Oh man. At the end of the day, it's kind of a spin-off of my personal mantra. My mantra that got me through my recovery was, it's the 6 inches between your ears and what's behind your rib cage that dictate what you're capable of. And so for me, for all of the young girls, young women out there, if you keep your head and your heart in the right place, everything else is going to follow in line. It doesn't matter what anybody else is saying or thinking about you. All that matters is that you can look in the mirror and love yourself and say, hey, guess what? We're here. We're going to do it again. And we're going to keep coming back, again, being better, stronger, faster, whatever you want to call it, than we were the day before. And so I think a lot of it just comes down to being able to be proud of who you are, be proud of your scars, and have a confidence in what you're going to be able to accomplish.
Wonderful. All right. I'm going to stop recording, but I want to talk to you if you have a little more time.
Huh?
You have a little more time?
Yeah.